The resignation letter trembled in Valerie's hands as she stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corner office, 52 stories above Paris. Behind her, Wendell Ashford's voice cut through the morning silence like a blade wrapped in velvet. "You think you can walk away from what happened at the chateau? From what we both felt?" She didn't turn around. Couldn't. Because if she looked into those steel-grey eyes again, she'd remember the way his mouth had tasted of champagne and dangerous promises, the way his hands had held her face like she was something precious he'd been searching for his entire life. "I'm your employee, Mr. Ashford. What happened was a mistake." He closed the distance between them, his reflection appearing in the glass beside hers. "Then why are you running instead of staying to prove it meant nothing?" The letter slipped from her fingers, floating to the marble floor like a white flag of surrender she couldn't afford to wave. "Because," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I'm terrified it meant everything." The chateau emerged from the darkness like something out of a fever dream, all ivory stone and mullioned windows glowing gold against the October sky. Valerie pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the limousine window and tried to remember how to breathe. 3 months. She'd been in Paris for exactly 3 months, working as a junior financial analyst at Delacroix and Associés, and somehow she'd ended up here, at the most exclusive corporate event of the season, surrounded by people who pronounced luxury brands correctly and knew which fork to use for oysters. First time at Montrose. The driver caught her eye in the rearview mirror, his expression kind. "First time at any chateau," she admitted, smoothing down the front of her dress for the 100th time. The midnight blue silk had cost half her monthly salary, but her colleague Margot had insisted. "You can't show up to Wendell Ashford's gala looking like you shop at Zara, chérie." The man notices everything. The limousine joined a queue of identical black vehicles, all depositing their elegant cargo at the base of sweeping stone steps. Valerie watched women in couture gowns glide up the stairs like they'd been born doing it, their jewelry catching the light from hundreds of lanterns lining the path. She didn't belong here. She belonged in her tiny 6th-floor walk-up in the Marais, eating takeout noodles and reviewing spreadsheets. She belonged anywhere but at a party thrown by Wendell Ashford, the 38-year-old CEO who'd taken his father's luxury goods empire and transformed it into a global powerhouse worth 23 billion euros. But Margot had been insistent. "Everyone from the mergers and acquisitions team has to attend. It's not optional. Besides, you've been working yourself to death since you arrived. Live a little." The driver opened her door, and the cool autumn air rushed in, carrying the scent of roses and something else, something expensive that she couldn't quite name. Valerie stepped out onto the gravel drive, her heels sinking slightly into the small stones. Around her, conversations floated in French, Italian, English, the languages of international wealth, mixing like cocktails at a bar she couldn't afford to drink at. She made it up the stairs without falling. Small victories. The chateau's interior stole whatever composure she'd managed to gather. Crystal chandeliers dripped from frescoed ceilings. Marble columns soared toward heights that made her dizzy. Everywhere she looked, there was gold, gilding frames, threading through tapestries, gleaming from candelabras that probably cost more than her student loans. A server appeared at her elbow with a tray of champagne flutes. Valerie took one, grateful for something to do with her hands. "You look like you're preparing for battle." The voice came from her left, low, amused, with a British accent that turned every word into something intimate. Valerie turned and found herself looking at a man in an impeccably tailored tuxedo. Dark skin, warm brown eyes, smile that suggested he knew exactly how attractive he was. "That obvious?" she asked. "Only to someone who remembers their first Delacroix event." He extended his hand. "Marcus Chen. I run the London office." "Valérie Baptiste." I run spreadsheets, lots of spreadsheets. His laugh was genuine. We all started somewhere. How long have you been with the company? 92 days, not that I'm counting. Still in the terror phase. That's healthy. Marcus glanced around the room, then leaned in conspiratorially. Want some advice? The terrace is your friend. Half the deals that actually matter get made out there, away from all this. He gestured at the opulence surrounding them. Performance. Valeri looked toward the tall doors leading outside, currently open to reveal a stone terrace and gardens beyond. I thought the point was to network inside. The point is to survive your first gala without making a fool of yourself. Trust me, the terrace is safer territory. Go, I'll cover for you if Margot asks. Before she could protest, Marcus had melted back into the crowd, leaving Valeri alone with her champagne and her rapidly fraying nerves. She looked at the terrace doors again. Fresh air suddenly seemed like the best idea anyone had ever had. The gardens at Chateau de Montrose were impossibly romantic, all manicured hedges and gravel paths lit by lanterns that cast pools of amber light into the darkness. Valerie found a relatively secluded spot near a stone balustrade, overlooking what appeared to be a reflecting pool, its surface mirror-smooth and scattered with floating candles. She set down her champagne flute and gripped the cool stone, letting the autumn air clear her head. This was better, quieter. She could hear music drifting from inside, something classical and elegant that probably cost a fortune to arrange. But out here, she could also hear crickets, the whisper of wind through the trees, normal things that reminded her she was still herself, even in a place like this. Most people spend the whole evening trying to get inside. You're the first person I've seen running away from it. Valerie's heart stopped. She knew that voice. Everyone at Delacroix and Associés knew that voice. She'd heard it in exactly 2 all-hands meetings, both times from the safety of the back row, but it was unmistakable, that particular blend of British precision and something darker, something that suggested he'd earned every inch of his power and hadn't forgotten the climb. She turned slowly, and there he was, Wendell Ashford, in person. 3 feet away. The photographs in Forbes and Financial Times didn't do him justice. They captured the sharp jaw, the grey eyes, the dark hair silvered at the temples, even though he was barely 38. They captured the expensive tailoring, the athletic build, the posture of a man who commanded rooms without raising his voice. What they didn't capture was the way he looked at her, like she was the only person at this party of 300. Like he'd been searching for her specifically and had finally found her. I'm not running away, Valeri managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Just taking a strategic retreat. His mouth curved slightly. Is that what we're calling it? What would you call it, Mr. Ashford? Wendell. He moved to stand beside her at the balustrade, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something subtle and devastatingly expensive. And I'd call it self-preservation. These events are exhausting. You throw them, which is how I know. He looked out over the gardens, his profile sharp against the darkness. Every October, same chateau, same people, same conversations about market volatility and real estate in Monaco. I could write the script in my sleep. Valeri studied him, trying to reconcile this tired, sardonic man with the titan of industry she'd read about. Then why do it? Because some traditions have purpose. My father started these galas 30 years ago, when Delacroix was just a small luxury goods company in Lyon. Now we employ 47,000 people across 6 continents. This, he gestured back toward the chateau, reminds everyone where we came from. Legacy matters. Even if you find it exhausting, especially then. He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his grey eyes made her breath catch. You're Valeri Baptiste, junior analyst, mergers and acquisitions. You joined us from Columbia Business School in July, top of your class. Margot says you're the best hire she's made in 5 years. Valerie blinked. You know who I am? I know everyone who works for me. You have 47,000 employees. I know the ones who matter. His gaze traveled over her face like he was memorizing it. And I notice the ones who hide on terraces when they should be inside building their networks. Heat crept up her neck. I'm not hiding. Liar! The word should have offended her. Instead, it felt like an invitation to honesty. Valerie looked away, back toward the reflecting pool with its floating candles. Fine, I'm hiding. I don't belong in there. I grew up in Baltimore. My mother cleaned houses. My father drove a taxi. I'm here on scholarships and student loans and sheer stubborn refusal to quit. But people like me. She gestured at her dress, her carefully styled hair, all the armor she'd put on tonight. We don't usually end up at parties in French chateaus. The silence stretched long enough that Valerie regretted every word. She'd just told the CEO of her company that she felt like an imposter. Brilliant. Career-defining moment right there. Then Wendell said quietly, My father was a tailor in Manchester, grew up in a council flat with 4 siblings. He came to France with £200 and a suitcase full of fabric samples. Everything we have now, all of this, he gestured at the chateau, the luxury surrounding them, he built from nothing. So don't tell me you don't belong here, Valerie. People like you are exactly who belong here. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected. Recognition, understanding, the particular kind of kinship that exists between people who've had to fight for every opportunity while others were simply born into them. I've never told anyone that before, she admitted, about my parents, about feeling like I'm always one wrong move away from being exposed as a fraud. Imposter syndrome, common among high achievers who worked for their success instead of inheriting it. His voice softened. It never entirely goes away. You just learn to function despite it. Does it get easier? No. You just get stronger. He paused, then added, Would you like to walk? The gardens are extensive and there's a pavilion near the north hedge that hardly anyone knows about. Every rational cell in Valerie's brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. Walking alone through darkened gardens with the CEO, a man she'd just met, a man who looked at her like, yes, she heard herself say, I'd like that. They walked in silence at first, following gravel paths that crunched softly under their feet. Lantern light gave way to moonlight as they moved deeper into the gardens, leaving the party's noise behind. The pavilion appeared around a curve, a small structure of white stone columns supporting a copper roof gone green with age. Wendell led her up the 3 shallow steps and into the space, where benches carved from stone offered a view back toward the chateau, now distant and dreamlike. He shrugged off his tuxedo jacket and laid it across one of the benches before gesturing for her to sit. You'll freeze otherwise, he said when she hesitated. She sat, and the jacket still held his body heat, his scent. It felt impossibly intimate, this small kindness. Wendell remained standing, one hand braced against a column, looking out at the manicured landscape. Can I tell you something I haven't told anyone? You don't know me, which is exactly why I can tell you. He turned, and in the moonlight his face was all angles and shadows. I'm exhausted, Valerie. Bone-deep, soul-level exhausted. I've spent 15 years building this company, exceeding every expectation, proving I deserve the position I inherited. And lately, I've started wondering what the point is. When do I get to just be? When do I get to want something for myself instead of for the shareholders, the board, the family legacy? The vulnerability in his voice undid something in her chest. This wasn't the CEO talking. This was just a man, tired and lonely, standing in moonlight and accidentally telling the truth. "What do you want?" she asked softly. "I don't know anymore. That's the problem." He looked at her then, and something in his expression shifted. "Or I didn't know. Until tonight." The air between them changed, charged, dangerous. "Mr. Ashford, Wendell." "Ooh, Wendell," she corrected, her pulse hammering. "This is inappropriate, ill-advised, potentially career-ending." He moved closer until he stood directly in front of where she sat. "I'm aware. I've been listing all the reasons I shouldn't have followed you onto that terrace from the moment I saw you through the window. Do you know how many reasons I came up with?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. 27. 27 excellent reasons why I should walk back inside and forget you exist." He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, his fingers traced the line of her jaw, tilting her face up toward his. "Would you like to know why I followed you anyway?" "Why?" The word barely made it past her lips. "Because in 15 years of attending these galas, you're the first person who looked as lost as I feel. The first person who didn't want something from me. The first person who ran away from the party instead of toward it." His thumb brushed across her bottom lip, and she stopped breathing entirely. "The first person who made me forget every single one of those 27 reasons." Valérie knew she should stand up, walk away, go back to the party and pretend this conversation never happened. She knew that whatever was happening between them was complicated and messy and could destroy the career she'd worked so hard to build. She knew all of that. She kissed him anyway. It started as a question, tentative, testing, giving him every opportunity to pull back. But Wendell didn't pull back. His hand slid into her hair, the other finding her waist, and he answered her question with one of his own, deepening the kiss until Valérie forgot where she ended and he began. He tasted like whiskey and want and something darker she couldn't name, but craved with sudden, startling intensity. When he finally broke the kiss, they were both breathing hard, his forehead pressed against hers. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "The worst," he agreed. "I work for you." "I know. This could complicate everything." "It already has." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his grey eyes nearly black in the moonlight. "But I'm not sorry. Are you?" Valérie thought about lying, thought about all the sensible, career-protecting things she should say. Instead, she told the truth. "No, I'm not sorry." Wendell smiled then, a real smile, not the polished corporate version she'd seen in photographs. It transformed his face, made him look younger, lighter, almost happy. "Good." He helped her to her feet, steadied her when she swayed slightly. "We should go back before people notice we're both gone." "And then what?" "Then—" He hesitated, his hand still holding hers. "Then we figure out what this is. What it could be, if you want to." Did she want to? Want this complicated, impossible thing with a man who held her career in his hands? A man she'd just met but who somehow felt like someone she'd been searching for without knowing it? "Yes," Valérie said, the word both a promise and a prayer. "I want to." They walked back toward the chateau together, not touching but not quite separate either, the space between them humming with possibility. As they reached the terrace, Wendell paused, his expression turning serious. "Valérie, whatever happens next, I need you to know it was real, tonight, this, us, not a game, not a whim, real." Before she could respond, voices floated from inside, and reality crashed back. They were standing on the terrace where anyone could see them. He was her boss. She was nobody. And everything had just changed. "I should go back alone," she said quietly. "Wait 5 minutes?" Wendell nodded, but his hand found hers one last time, squeezed once. "See you Monday, Valérie Baptiste." She walked back into the golden light of the party alone, her lips still tingling from his kiss, her entire world tilted on its axis. She had no idea that Monday would bring an entirely different kind of reckoning. The weekend passed in a blur of panic and second-guessing. Valérie spent Saturday pacing her apartment, her phone clutched in her hand, waiting for a message that never came. Sunday, she gave up waiting and started writing. By Monday morning at 6:45, she had a resignation letter printed on proper stationery, folded into a crisp envelope, and burning a hole in her leather portfolio. The metro to Saint-Lazare was packed with early commuters, all of them looking as tired as she felt. Valérie had slept maybe 6 hours total since Friday night, her mind replaying that kiss on an endless loop, the way Wendell had looked at her, touched her. The things he'd said in moonlight that probably meant nothing in the harsh fluorescence of Monday morning. She'd kissed her boss, her CEO, at a company event. There was no version of this story that ended well. The Delacroix and Associés headquarters rose 68 stories above the 8th arrondissement, all steel and glass and architectural ambition. Valérie had spent her first week working there just staring out the windows, unable to believe this was real. Now, walking through the revolving doors into the marble lobby, it felt like walking toward her own execution. "Morning, Valérie," Margot called out from the elevator bank, her red hair caught up in a perfect chignon. "How was the gala? I lost track of you after the first hour. It was fine, beautiful chateau. Did you meet anyone interesting?" Margot's eyes sparkled with matchmaking intentions. "There were several very eligible executives there." "Please tell me you at least talked to someone." "I talked to Marcus Chen. Marcus is married to his BlackBerry. I meant romantically interesting." The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside with a dozen other early arrivals. "You're 26 and gorgeous. You should be having fun, not spending every weekend reviewing merger contracts." Valérie managed a non-committal sound. If Margot knew who she'd actually spent the evening with, who she'd kissed in that moonlit pavilion. The thought died as the elevator began its ascent. 43rd floor, mergers and acquisitions. 3 floors below the executive suites, where Wendell's office occupied the entire northeast corner. She'd typed the resignation email 4 times and deleted it 4 times. A letter felt more professional, more final. She'd wait until 9 o'clock, take it up to the executive floor, leave it with his assistant, and then spend her 2-week notice period avoiding eye contact. Perfect plan. Foolproof. "You okay?" Margot asked as they exited onto their floor. "You look pale. Just didn't sleep well." "Post-gala adrenaline crash, classic. Come on, I'll make you decent coffee, and you can tell me all about whatever spreadsheet crisis kept you up." Valérie's desk was positioned near the windows, with a view across the Paris rooftops toward Sacré-Cœur in the distance. Normally, she loved this spot. Today, it felt exposed, vulnerable. She set down her portfolio, pulled out the envelope, and stared at it. 27 reasons, Wendell had said. 27 reasons he shouldn't have followed her onto that terrace. Valérie could list 33 reasons why she needed to quit. Starting with the fact that she'd completely compromised her professional integrity and ending with the reality that nothing good could come from a relationship between a junior analyst and the CEO of a publicly traded company. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. Come to my office, now." Her heart stopped, then started again too fast. No signature, but she knew who'd sent it. The message had that same clipped authority she'd heard in his voice Friday night. "Valérie!" Margot appeared with 2 steaming mugs. "Coffee, extra strong. I need to—" Valérie grabbed the envelope, shoved it back into her portfolio. "I'll be right back." She didn't wait for questions. The elevator to the executive floors required a special keycard. She had to talk her way past security, her voice shaking slightly as she explained that Mr. Ashford had requested her presence. The guard made a call, then waved her through with a knowing look that made her stomach turn. 65th floor, the executive suite. Everything here was quieter, more refined. The carpet absorbed sound. The art on the walls looked original. Even the air smelled expensive. Wendell's assistant, a woman in her 50s with perfect posture and assessing eyes, gestured toward the corner office. "He's expecting you. Go right in." The door was solid mahogany, heavy enough that Valeri had to push with both hands. It swung open silently, revealing an office that took up at least 2,000 square feet, floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls, a desk that looked hand-carved from a single piece of dark wood, leather sofas arranged around a glass coffee table, and beyond it all, a private terrace with views that stretched to the Arc de Triomphe. Wendell stood at the windows, his back to her, hands in his pockets. He wore a charcoal suit that fit like it had been made for him, which it probably had been. Monday morning, CEO. No trace of the man who'd kissed her in moonlight. Close the door. Valeri did, her fingers trembling slightly on the handle. Mr. Ashford. "What's in the portfolio?" Her breath caught. "What?" He turned then, and his expression was unreadable. "You've been clutching it since you walked in. What's in it?" There was no point lying. Valeri pulled out the envelope, held it up. "My resignation. Effective 2 weeks from today." Something flickered across Wendell's face. Surprise, maybe, or disappointment. He crossed the office in long strides, plucked the envelope from her fingers, and without opening it, walked to his desk. She watched, frozen, as he produced a lighter from the top drawer and held the flame to one corner of the envelope. "What are you doing?" She rushed forward, but he held it out of reach, watching calmly as the paper caught fire. "Saving you from a decision you'd regret." "You can't just, that's my resignation, I have the right to quit." The envelope was ash now. Wendell dropped it into a crystal bowl on his desk and turned to face her fully. "Submit it again, and I'll burn that one too. Submit it 100 times, and I'll burn them all. You're not quitting, Valeri. You don't get to make that choice for me." "You're right, but I can refuse to accept it, which I do." He moved closer until only a few feet separated them. "You're running because you're scared. Because what happened Friday night felt too big, too fast, too dangerous. I understand that, but I'm not letting you throw away your career because you kissed me. I'm not—" Valeri stopped, regrouped. "This isn't about the kiss." Liar. The same word he'd used at the chateau, the same tone, knowing, almost amused. It broke something open in her chest. "Fine. It's about the kiss. It's about the fact that I kissed my boss at a company event, and now I can't look at you without remembering how your mouth felt against mine, and wondering if you—" She cut herself off, breathing hard. "I can't work here anymore, not like this." "Why not?" "Because it's inappropriate. Because people will think I'm sleeping my way up the corporate ladder. Because every success I have from this point forward will be tainted by the assumption that I only got it because of you." Wendell studied her in silence for a long moment. Then quietly, "Is that what you think? That Friday night was about me trying to leverage my position?" "No. But that's what everyone else will think." "And that matters to you? What everyone else thinks?" "Yes, of course it matters. I've worked too hard to have my reputation destroyed because I couldn't keep my professional life separate from—" She gestured helplessly between them. "From whatever this is." "Then let me make it simple." Wendell returned to his desk, pulled out a sheet of paper, and began writing. "I'm documenting that any future promotions, raises, or advancement opportunities you receive will be determined solely by your performance, reviewed by an independent committee that doesn't include me. I'm establishing a clear firewall between our professional and personal interactions, and I'm putting it in writing that you have the absolute right to end anything personal between us without fear of professional retaliation. Does that address your concerns?" Valerie stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." He finished writing, signed it with a bold scrawl, and slid it across the desk. "Read it. If you want legal counsel to review it before signing, I'll pay for the lawyer myself." She picked up the paper with shaking hands. It said exactly what he'd promised. Every protection she could possibly want, laid out in precise legal language that someone, probably his general counsel, must have helped draft over the weekend. He'd been planning this, preparing for her to run, and he'd created a solution before she even walked through the door. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Wendell came around the desk, stopping just close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Because Friday night wasn't a mistake, Valerie, and I'm not going to let you convince yourself it was. What happened between us, that was real, unexpected, probably inadvisable, but real, and I want to know where it goes. I'm your employee. You're an exceptional analyst, who I hired based solely on merit and who will advance in this company based solely on her work. That won't change." His voice softened. "But you're also a woman who kissed me like she'd been waiting her whole life to do it, and I'm a man who can't stop thinking about when I get to kiss her again." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "This is crazy." "Probably. It could implode spectacularly. Most worthwhile things risk implosion." He reached out slowly and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was gentle, careful, asking permission with every millimeter. "But I'm willing to try if you are, with boundaries, with protections, with absolute clarity that your career is yours and won't be compromised by whatever exists between us personally." Valerie looked down at the paper in her hands. Every safeguard, every protection. He'd thought of everything, not to trap her, but to free her. To make it possible for this impossible thing to exist without destroying her. "I should still resign," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You should do whatever makes you happy. But don't run because you're scared. Run because you genuinely don't want this. Want me." He paused. "Do you want this, Valerie?" It was the same question he'd asked at the pavilion, the same choice. Stay or go, risk or safety, everything or nothing. She thought about her mother, who'd cleaned houses for 40 years and taught her that women like them had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. She thought about her father, who'd driven a taxi 70 hours a week so she could go to college. She thought about every scholarship application, every all-nighter, every time she'd had to prove she belonged somewhere people assumed she didn't. She'd fought too hard to let fear win now. "I want this," she said quietly. "I want you. But if it gets complicated, it will get complicated. Then we handle it like adults, honestly, no games." "Agreed." Wendell held out his hand. "Partners." She shook it, formal and absurd and somehow perfect. "Partners." He didn't let go immediately. His thumb traced circles on her palm, and heat spiraled up her arm, pooling low in her belly. "Can I take you to dinner tonight? Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can actually talk without 300 people watching." "Like a date?" "Exactly like a date. Unless you'd prefer to keep pretending Friday night never happened and maintain purely professional interactions punctuated by occasional longing stares across conference rooms." Despite everything, Valerie laughed. "When you put it that way, dinner it is. I'll pick you up at 8. Text me your address." He finally released her hand, and she felt the loss of contact like a physical ache. "Now go back to your desk before Margot sends a search party." "And Valerie?" She paused at the door. "Yes. Thank you. For staying. For trying." His grey eyes held hers with devastating intensity. "I know this isn't easy, but I promise I'll make it worth the risk." Valérie walked back to the elevator in a daze, the letter of protections clutched in her hand, her heart doing complicated acrobatics in her chest. She'd come here to resign, to run, to protect herself from the messy, dangerous thing growing between them. Instead, she'd agreed to dinner, to trying, to seeing where this impossible, inadvisable, absolutely terrifying thing could go. Margot looked up as Valérie returned to her desk. "You were gone a while. Everything okay?" "Everything's—" Valérie sat down, let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Everything's complicated." Complicated how? How could she even begin to explain? That she'd kissed the CEO, that he'd burned her resignation letter, that they were going to dinner tonight, and she had no idea what she was doing, but couldn't seem to stop herself from wanting it anyway. "Just work stuff," Valérie said finally. "I'll tell you later." Margot gave her a searching look, but didn't push. "Coffee's cold. I'll make fresh." As her colleague disappeared toward the break room, Valérie's phone buzzed. Another text from the same unknown number, which she now realized must be Wendell's personal cell. 8 o'clock. "Wear something comfortable. We're not going anywhere that requires you to use the right fork for oysters. Despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the voice in her head screaming that this was a terrible idea, Valérie smiled. She had absolutely no idea what she was doing. But for the first time in 3 months, in 3 years, maybe in her entire careful, controlled life, she was doing something just because she wanted to, not because it was safe, not because it made sense, but because when Wendell Ashford looked at her, she felt like someone worth knowing, worth wanting, worth the risk, even if the risk was everything she'd worked for, even if the risk was her heart. Dinner turned into breakfast 3 weeks later, not in the way Margot would have assumed, with raised eyebrows and knowing smiles, but in the way that mattered more. Conversations that stretched past midnight in quiet bistros, where the staff knew Wendell by name and brought wine without being asked. Walks along the Seine, where they talked about everything except work. Saturday mornings at his favorite café in the Marais, where he read the Financial Times and she graded his croissant choices. "You can't keep ordering pain au chocolat," Valérie said, watching him demolish his third pastry of the morning. "It's basically dessert pretending to be breakfast," says the woman currently eating what appears to be an entire tart. "It's tarte aux pommes, completely different. Apples are healthy." Wendell's laugh drew glances from nearby tables, not because it was loud, but because it was genuine. Valérie had learned that Wendell Ashford had 2 laughs, the polished corporate version he deployed in meetings, and this one. Real, unguarded, reserved for moments when he forgot he was supposed to be the untouchable CEO. She was dangerously addicted to being the person who made him forget. "I have something to tell you," Wendell said, his expression shifting to something more serious. "And you're not going to like it." Valérie set down her fork. "That's a terrible way to start a Saturday morning conversation. The Fontaine merger, the luxury conglomerate deal I mentioned last week, the board approved it yesterday. It's worth 3.7 billion euros, and it's the most complex acquisition we've undertaken in 5 years. That's good news. Congratulations. I'm assigning you to the deal team as my direct report." The cafe noise faded to white noise. "You're what?" "You heard me." Wendell's grey eyes held hers steadily. "I need someone I can trust on this. Someone brilliant with merger analytics, who won't fold under pressure when negotiations get ugly. That's you." "Wendell, we agreed. We agreed I wouldn't show favoritism. This isn't favoritism. Ask anyone in M&A. You've closed 8 deals in 3 months with 0 errors. You spotted that accounting irregularity in the Dubois acquisition that saved us 42 million euros. Margot calls you the best hire she's made in 5 years. You earned this position. People will talk. People always talk. Let them. He leaned forward, voice dropping. I'm not going to hold you back from opportunities you've earned just because we're dating. That would be another form of discrimination, one I won't participate in. Valeri's mind raced. Direct report meant working closely with him. Late nights, travel, constant proximity. Everything they'd been carefully avoiding for 3 weeks while they navigated whatever this was between them. What if I mess up? She asked quietly. What if I fail, and it reflects badly on you? Then you fail, and we learn from it. Same as anyone else. His hand found hers across the table, thumb tracing familiar circles on her palm. I believe in you, Valeri. More than that, I trust you. Not because we're dating, but because you're exceptional at what you do. Don't let fear make you smaller than you are. She wanted to argue, to list all the ways this could go wrong, but sitting in morning sunlight, his hand warm around hers, Valeri realized something. She trusted him too, not just romantically, but professionally. He'd kept every promise he'd made in that office 3 weeks ago. No favoritism, no special treatment. He'd been harder on her in meetings than anyone else, if anything, making sure no one could accuse her of coasting on their relationship. When do we start? She asked. Wendell's smile was pure relief. Monday. But I'm warning you now, this merger is going to consume our lives for the next 8 weeks, late nights, weekend work sessions. I have a private office in my apartment where we can work without the entire company watching. If that makes you uncomfortable. Your apartment? Penthouse. Top 3 floors of a building in Saint-Germain-des-Prés. My father bought it 20 years ago, back when he couldn't afford it but refused to live anywhere less than impressive. Wendell signaled for the check. It has a dedicated office space, secure servers for confidential documents, and a view of the Eiffel Tower that makes thinking clearly slightly difficult. But it's private, discreet. No one from work needs to know we're meeting there. Valeri's pulse quickened. 3 weeks of carefully public dates, 3 weeks of goodnight kisses that ended too soon because they'd agreed to take things slowly. 3 weeks of wanting more and exercising restraint that was getting harder to maintain. His apartment. Private. Just the two of them and 3.7 billion euros worth of merger documents. Okay, she said. Your place. For work. Nah, for work, Wendell agreed, but something in his eyes suggested he was as aware as she was of how dangerous that proximity would be. The penthouse was ridiculous. Valeri stood in the entrance of Wendell's apartment Monday evening, trying not to gape like a tourist. 3 floors connected by a floating staircase made of glass and steel. Windows everywhere, offering views across Paris that belonged in magazines. Furniture that was clearly designer, but somehow still looked comfortable. Art on the walls that she suspected was original and probably worth more than her student loans. This is where you live? She asked, setting down her laptop bag. Technically, though I spend most nights at the office. Wendell shrugged off his suit jacket, loosened his tie. My father believed in investing in real estate, said it was the only thing that reliably appreciated besides good taste. The top floor is the master suite. Middle floor is living space. This floor, he gestured around them, is kitchen, dining, and my office. Come on, I'll show you. The office occupied the entire northeast corner, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls and a view that made Valeri's breath catch. The Eiffel Tower rose in the distance, already lit for evening, golden against the darkening sky. You weren't kidding about the view making it hard to think. Wait until you see it at midnight. Wendell moved to a sleek desk setup. Dual monitors, ergonomic chair, shelves lined with leather-bound books, and what appeared to be actual first editions. I had IT set up a secure workstation for you. Same server access I have. Everything we need for the Fontaine deal. They worked in focused silence for 2 hours, reviewing acquisition documents and financial projections. Valerie had expected awkwardness, being alone with him in his space, with a bed somewhere upstairs, and 3 weeks of carefully restrained attraction humming between them. But once they dove into the work, everything else faded. This was what she was good at: numbers, analysis, finding the patterns others missed. "Here," she said, pointing to a line item buried in the third quarter report. "Fontaine's luxury watch division. Revenues up 18%, but operational costs increased 23% in the same period. That's unsustainable." Wendell leaned over her shoulder to look, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "Good catch. Flag it for due diligence. What else?" They went through 67 pages of documents before Valerie's stomach growled loudly enough to break their concentration. Wendell glanced at his watch, a simple piece that probably cost more than her rent. 9:30. "I'm a terrible host. Are you hungry?" "Starving. I can order from the restaurant downstairs. They know me." Or, he hesitated, "I could actually cook, if you're willing to risk it." Valerie raised an eyebrow. "The CEO of Delacroix and Associés Cooks? The son of a tailor from Manchester Cooks. The CEO mostly survives on coffee and corporate catering." He was already moving toward the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves. "But I make a decent pasta carbonara. My mother's recipe. The real one, not the cream-based imposter version." She followed him into a kitchen that was all marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. Wendell moved through the space with surprising competence, pulling out eggs, pancetta, parmigiano reggiano, pepper. His hands, the same hands that signed billion-euro deals and commanded boardrooms, whisked eggs with practiced ease. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "I'm just recalibrating my entire understanding of who you are." "And who did you think I was?" Valerie considered. "Untouchable. Perfect. Someone who emerged fully formed from business school wearing bespoke suits and knowing the right fork for oysters." Disappointing? Terrifying. That made him look up. Terrifying? Perfect people are terrifying. They don't leave room for anyone else's imperfections. But this... She gestured at him, at the kitchen, at the domestic normalcy of watching him cook. "This I can work with." Wendell's smile was soft. "I'm far from perfect, Valerie. I'm just very good at hiding the mess." "Everyone has mess. Mine's particularly complicated." He added pasta to boiling water, the steam rising between them. "My father built an empire, and I inherited the pressure of maintaining it. My mother died when I was 19. My sister lives in New York and hasn't spoken to me in 3 years because she thinks I chose the company over family. And I was engaged once to a woman my father selected because she came from the right family and understood the requirements of being married to someone like me." Valerie went still. "You were engaged?" "For 8 months, 2 years ago. Her name was Charlotte. Beautiful, accomplished, perfect on paper. We barely knew each other. The engagement was more merger than marriage, combining our family's interests, strengthening business ties. She understood that. I understood that. What I didn't understand was how soul-destroying it would be to wake up every morning next to someone I felt nothing for. What happened? I called it off 6 weeks before the wedding, humiliated her, infuriated my father, cost the company a lucrative partnership with her family's investment firm, but I couldn't." His voice caught. "I couldn't do it, couldn't promise forever to someone I didn't love just because it made good business sense." He drained the pasta with more force than necessary, the movements almost aggressive. Valerie watched emotions play across his face. Regret, anger, something that looked like old pain surfacing. "My father still hasn't forgiven me," Wendell continued quietly. "He calls it my moment of weakness, says I put personal feelings above family legacy. Maybe he's right. Maybe that makes me selfish. But I couldn't marry someone just to satisfy expectations." Valerie moved closer until she stood beside him at the counter. That doesn't make you selfish, it makes you human. Does it? He looked at her then, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly undid her. Or does it make me a coward? Because here's the truth, Valerie, I'm terrified of this, of what I feel when I'm with you, because it's not nothing, it's not casual. And if I let myself fall completely, if I let you in past all the carefully constructed walls, and then it ends. She kissed him before he could finish. Not gentle like their first kiss at the chateau. Not restrained like the goodnight kisses they'd shared over 3 careful weeks. This was need and want, and 3 weeks of holding back, finally breaking through. Wendell's hands found her waist, pulling her closer. She tasted pepper and pasta water on his lips, felt the tension in his shoulders under her palms. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "The pasta's going to overcook," Valerie whispered against his mouth. "I don't care." "Yes, you do. You're annoyingly competent. You care about everything." His laugh was breathless. "You're right. Damn it." He reluctantly released her, turned back to the stove. "But we're continuing this conversation later." They ate at the dining table, the Eiffel Tower sparkling through the windows at the top of each hour. Wendell had been right. The carbonara was perfect, silky, rich, nothing like the heavy cream versions she'd had before. "Your mother taught you this?" Valerie asked. "Every Sunday it was our tradition. She'd cook and we'd talk about everything except business. It was the one time my father wasn't allowed to discuss the company." His expression softened with memory. "She died of cancer. Fast. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. I was 19, home from university for summer break. I never got to tell her." He stopped. "She never knew I'd eventually take over the company. Never saw what we built. I think she'd be proud." "Would she?" Wendell's voice turned bitter. "Of a son who works 80-hour weeks, who nearly married someone he didn't love to seal a business deal, who hasn't spoken to his sister in 3 years because I can't figure out how to be both a good CEO and a good brother." Valerie set down her fork. "Call her." "What?" "Your sister. Call her. Tonight." "It's not that simple. Nothing worth doing is simple. You just told me not to let fear make me smaller than I am. So don't let pride or stubbornness or whatever's keeping you from your sister make you smaller than you are." Wendell stared at her like she'd just solved an equation he'd been struggling with for years. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "See through all the complicated justifications to what actually matters." He reached across the table, took her hand. "Charlotte never challenged me, never pushed back. She agreed with everything I said, supported every decision, played the perfect supportive partner, and it was suffocating. But you call me on my nonsense. You make me want to be better, not for the company, not for my father's legacy, just better. Good, because you're stuck with me now, at least for the next 8 weeks of this merger." "Just 8 weeks?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither of them was quite ready to voice. What happened after the merger? After the carefully defined professional boundaries of this project dissolved? Were they building something real, or just indulging in an affair that would burn bright and fast before collapsing under the weight of their impossible situation? Valerie didn't know, wasn't sure she wanted to know yet. For now, this was enough. Pasta carbonara and Parisian views, and a man who looked at her like she was the solution to problems he hadn't known how to solve. They returned to work after dinner, spreading documents across the dining table when the office felt too formal. Around midnight, Valerie caught Wendell staring out the window instead of reviewing the labor dispute analysis she'd prepared. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm in trouble." "The merger?" "No, you." He turned to face her fully. 3 weeks ago, I thought this could be simple. That we'd date, see where it went, keep it separate from work. But it's not simple anymore. Maybe it never was, because when you're here in my space, challenging my assumptions and making me laugh and looking at me like I'm more than just the CEO, I can't pretend this is casual. Valeri's heart hammered. What is it then? Terrifying, wonderful, completely inadvisable. He crossed to where she sat, tilted her chin up with one finger. I'm falling for you, Valérie Baptiste. Past tense, present tense, continuous action. And I have no idea what to do about it, except tell you the truth and hope you don't run. She should run. Every rational cell in her brain screamed at her to protect herself, to end this before it got more complicated. Before she fell so far, there was no climbing back out. Instead, she stood up, closed the distance between them, and kissed him with all the honesty she could manage. I'm falling too, and I'm terrified, but I'm not running. Promise? Promise. This time, when his mouth found hers, there was no holding back. 3 weeks of restraint shattered. His hands slid into her hair, tilting her head for deeper access. She grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer, needing the solid reality of him against her. They stumbled backward, knocking into the table, documents scattered. Neither of them cared. Wendell lifted her onto the table edge, stepped between her legs, and kissed her like he was drowning, and she was air. Valérie wrapped her legs around his waist, her hands exploring the muscles of his back through the thin fabric of his shirt. Upstairs, he breathed against her throat. We should... Yes. But before they could move, his phone rang. The specific ringtone that meant board emergency. Wendell froze, his forehead dropping to her shoulder with a groan. Don't answer it, Valérie whispered. I have to. It's my father. He pulled away, and the loss of contact felt physical. Valérie watched him answer, his expression shifting from desire to professional competence in seconds flat. What's wrong? When? I see. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and turned to her with an expression that held apology and resignation. The Fontaine merger. Their CEO just leaked to the press that we're in talks. The stock's already moving. I need to get to the office, do damage control before markets open in Asia. I'll come with you. Valérie, you said I'm on the deal team. This is the deal. I'm coming. Something flickered in his eyes. Pride, maybe, or relief that he didn't have to face this alone. Grab your laptop. This is going to be a long night. It was 3 a.m. before they had the press release drafted, vetted by legal, and approved by the board. 5 a.m. before the stock stabilized. 7 before they finally left the office, exhausted and running on coffee and sheer, stubborn determination. Wendell drove her home through empty Paris streets, neither of them speaking. When he pulled up outside her building, Valérie turned to look at him. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? Ruining our evening? For trusting me, for letting me help, for... She gestured helplessly. For all of it. Wendell caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. Go get some sleep. I'll see you in the office in 3 hours. 3 hours isn't sleep. Welcome to crisis management. It's going to get worse before it gets better. He was right. Over the next 3 weeks, the Fontaine merger consumed everything, 16-hour days, working dinners where they barely tasted the food. Weekend sessions at his apartment that started professional and ended with them on his couch at 2 a.m, her reading contracts while he ran financial models, their legs tangled together in unconscious intimacy. They were building something. Not just the merger, but this, whatever existed between them. A partnership, a trust that ran deeper than romance, though the romance was there too, in stolen kisses between conference calls, in the way his hand found hers under the table during board presentations, in falling asleep on his shoulder during the car ride home and waking to find he'd carried her to his guest room and left her to rest. but there were shadows too. Pressure from his father, who'd started questioning Wendell's judgment on the deal, whispers in the office about how much time they spent together. The weight of knowing that one wrong move, one perception of impropriety could destroy everything they were trying to build. On a Tuesday evening, 4 weeks into the merger process, Valérie's phone rang. Unknown number. "Is this Valérie Baptiste?" "Yes." "Who's calling?" "My name is Charlotte Beaumont. I believe you know my former fiancé." The world tilted. Valérie gripped her phone tighter. Yes, good. Then you and I need to talk, because there are things about Wendell Ashford that you deserve to know, things he won't tell you himself." The line went dead before Valérie could respond. She sat in her apartment, staring at her phone as the Eiffel Tower sparkled outside her window. And for the first time since she'd decided not to run, Valérie wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. What secrets was Wendell hiding, and were they about to destroy everything? Charlotte Beaumont looked like she'd stepped out of a Chanel advertisement. Blonde hair swept into a flawless chignon. Cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Valérie's entire wardrobe. Pearls at her throat that were definitely real. She sat across from Valérie at a corner table in Le Meurice, one of Paris's most exclusive hotels, sipping Earl Grey from porcelain so delicate it was nearly transparent. "Thank you for meeting me," Charlotte said, her accent pure finishing school. "I wasn't certain you would." Valérie wrapped her hands around her own teacup, needing something to do with the nervous energy coursing through her. "You said there were things I should know about Wendell." "There are, but first—" Charlotte's blue eyes assessed her with surgical precision. "How serious is it? Between you and him?" The question landed like a challenge. Valérie could lie, deflect, claim it was just professional. But something in Charlotte's expression suggested she'd know the lie immediately. "Serious enough that I'm sitting here instead of telling you to go to hell." Charlotte's lips curved slightly. "Good. At least you're honest. Wendell always did prefer honesty to diplomacy. It's one of the few things I genuinely liked about him." "You called me here to tell me you liked your ex-fiancé's honesty?" "I called you here to warn you." Charlotte set down her teacup with precise care. "About his father, about the expectations that come with being involved with Wendell Ashford, about the price you'll pay if you're not prepared for what that life demands. I'm not marrying him. We're just dating, seeing where it goes." Charlotte's smile turned sad. "That's what I thought too at first, that we could keep it casual, figure things out. But there is nothing casual about Wendell's world, Valérie. His father will never allow it. His father doesn't control his personal life, doesn't he?" Charlotte leaned forward. "Let me tell you what happened when Wendell and I got engaged. His father, Richard Ashford, called me to his office the day after Wendell proposed. He had a contract prepared, 47 pages detailing exactly what would be expected of me as Wendell's wife. Public appearances, social obligations, required charity involvement, acceptable behavior at company events. Even," her voice tightened, "a timeline for producing heirs, 2 children, preferably at least 1 son, within the first 5 years of marriage." Valérie felt sick. "That's insane." "That's legacy. That's what it means to be part of the Ashford family. Everything serves the company. Everything protects the brand. Personal happiness is a luxury they can't afford." Charlotte's fingers traced the rim of her teacup. "I accepted it because I understood the rules. I came from that world. Old money recognizes old money. We speak the same language. And you're telling me this because you think I don't speak that language? I'm telling you this because Wendell broke our engagement, and his father made sure I paid for it. Contracts were cancelled. Business partnerships dissolved. My family's investment firm lost 3 of its largest clients, all of them connected to Delacroix and Associés. Richard Ashford doesn't forgive betrayal." And he considered Wendell's decision to leave me a betrayal of everything he'd built. The elegant room suddenly felt suffocating. Valerie forced herself to ask, "Why are you telling me this?" Charlotte was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. "Because I saw the photos." "What photos?" "You and Wendell, leaving his building at 3 in the morning 4 days ago. Someone sent them to me. Anonymous email. But I know who sent them. Richard's people. He has investigators who track Wendell's movements, document his relationships. He's building a file on you, Valerie, learning everything about you, your background, your family, your student debt, your every vulnerability." Fear spiked through Valerie's chest. "That's illegal. It's thorough. And when Richard decides you're unsuitable, which he will, because you're not from their world, you don't have the pedigree or the connections or the family wealth, he'll use everything he's gathered to destroy you professionally. He'll make sure you can never work in finance again. He'll bury you so completely that—" "Stop!" Valerie's voice came out harder than intended. "Why are you really here, Charlotte? If you're trying to scare me away from Wendell so you can—" "I don't want him back." Charlotte's interruption was sharp, final. What Wendell and I had was never love. It was arrangement, contract, strategic alliance. When he ended it, I was humiliated, yes, angry, absolutely, but not heartbroken, because you can't break what was never whole. Then what do you want? To give you a choice I didn't have, to warn you before Richard's machine starts grinding you down. Charlotte reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "These are copies of the contract Richard had prepared for me, the investigation reports he compiled, everything you need to understand what you're walking into." Valerie didn't take the envelope. "If his father is so terrible, why hasn't Wendell cut ties with him? Because Richard owns 51% of Delacroix and Associés. Wendell's CEO, but his father controls the board. If Wendell defies him too openly, Richard can remove him from his position, strip him of everything he's worked for. Wendell knows this. It's why he caved on our engagement in the first place, because his father demanded it. And it's why he ultimately broke it, because even Wendell has limits to how much of himself he'll sacrifice. You're saying he's trapped. I'm saying he's complicated. He wants to be his own man, but he's built his entire identity around the company his father created. He wants love, but he's terrified it'll cost him everything he's worked for. He wants you." Charlotte's voice softened. "I can see that in the photos, the way he looks at you. I never saw that expression on his face when he looked at me. But wanting and having are different things. Especially in Wendell's world." The envelope sat on the white tablecloth between them like an unexploded bomb. "I loved him once, you know," Charlotte said quietly. "Or I thought I did. In the early days, before the contract and the expectations and the weight of being an Ashford wife crushed whatever we might have built. There were moments when I'd see glimpses of who he could be if he wasn't carrying his father's empire on his shoulders. Funny, vulnerable, almost happy. Those moments gave me hope that maybe we could make it work. What happened to that hope? Richard happened. The night Wendell told his father he was ending our engagement, Richard showed up at my apartment, told me Wendell was making the biggest mistake of his life, that he'd regret it, that I should fight for the relationship if I had any sense. When I said I wouldn't fight for someone who didn't want me, Richard... She paused, her composure cracking slightly. He told me I'd failed, that I'd clearly not been woman enough to keep Wendell interested, that my family should be ashamed they'd raised a daughter too weak to fulfill her obligations. Valerie's hands clenched into fists. That's abusive. That's Richard Ashford. And if you stay with Wendell, you'll meet him eventually. He'll smile. He'll be charming. He'll assess you with those cold eyes and find you wanting. And then he'll begin the process of removing you from Wendell's life piece by piece, until you have no choice but to leave or be destroyed. Wendell wouldn't let that happen. Wendell is 38 years old and still trying to earn his father's approval. What makes you think he'll choose differently this time? The question hung in the air between them. Valerie wanted to argue, to defend Wendell, to say that what they had was different, real, worth fighting for. But doubt crept in like fog, obscuring her certainty. Charlotte stood, leaving the envelope on the table. Read it or don't. Believe me or don't. But know this, Valerie, I'm not your enemy. I'm someone who survived what you're about to face, and I'm giving you the tools I wish I'd had. Use them wisely. She left without another word, her heels clicking against marble until she disappeared into the hotel's gilded lobby. Valerie sat alone at the table, staring at the envelope. She could walk away, throw it in the trash unopened, trust Wendell completely. Believe that love could overcome legacy and that together they were strong enough to face whatever his father threw at them. Or she could open it. Arm herself with knowledge. Prepare for the battle Charlotte insisted was coming. Her phone buzzed. Wendell. Missing you. Dinner tonight? My place. I'll actually cook this time. Her heart twisted. She thought about the man who'd held her on his couch at 2 a.m, who'd shared stories about his mother's carbonara recipe, who'd looked at her like she was the answer to questions he'd been too afraid to ask. She thought about his father, the contract, the investigation, the machine designed to grind down anyone who didn't fit the Ashford mold. Valerie picked up the envelope and left the hotel. She spent the afternoon in her apartment reading every page. The contract was worse than Charlotte had described. Clinical, dehumanizing, reducing marriage to a series of obligations and performance metrics. The investigation reports were thorough to the point of invasive, detailing her mother's cleaning jobs, her father's taxi routes, her scholarship applications, even her college roommates' political affiliations. Richard Ashford had been watching, documenting, preparing. By the time Valerie arrived at Wendell's building that evening, she felt like she'd been scraped raw. The doorman greeted her by name now. She'd been here often enough over the past 4 weeks that the staff recognized her. The private elevator required a code that Wendell had given her 3 days ago. Small intimacies that felt enormous. Signs that this was real, progressing, becoming something neither of them could easily walk away from. Wendell answered the door in jeans and a navy sweater, his hair slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. You're early. I haven't even started. He stopped, really looking at her. What's wrong? We need to talk. His expression shifted immediately to concern. Come in. She followed him to the living room, where evidence of his attempted cooking lay scattered across the kitchen counter, vegetables half chopped, recipe pulled up on his tablet. Domestic. Normal. Everything the contract said their lives would never be. Charlotte contacted me, Valerie said without preamble. Wendell went very still. When? This morning. We met at Le Maurice. She told me about your father, about the contract he made her sign, about what he does to people who don't fit into his vision for your life. Valerie, is it true? Does your father have investigators following you, documenting your relationships, building files on the women you date? His silence was answer enough. How long have you known, she asked, her voice tight, that he was investigating you? 2 weeks. I found out by accident, saw an email on his assistant's screen when I stopped by his office. I confronted him immediately. And what did he say? Wendell's jaw clenched. That he was protecting the family interests. That I had a history of poor judgment in romantic relationships, and he was simply ensuring I didn't make another mistake that would cost the company billions. He meant me. I'm the mistake. He meant he's a controlling bastard who can't accept that I'm capable of making my own decisions. Wendell crossed to her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. I told him to stop, to destroy whatever files he'd compiled, to leave you alone. He refused. Said it was his responsibility as chairman of the board to vet anyone who might become involved with the company's CEO. So he's still investigating me. Probably. I can't control what my father does. I've tried for 38 years, but I can control how I respond to it. His grey eyes held hers intensely. I'm not leaving you, Valeri. I don't care what files he builds or what contracts he draws up or how much pressure he applies. You're not a mistake. You're the best decision I've made in years. He destroyed Charlotte's family business when you broke your engagement. I know. He'll destroy me too if I stay. He'll try. But Charlotte wasn't. Wendell stopped, choosing his words carefully. Charlotte and I never had what you and I have. She was playing a role, following expectations. When I ended things, she was relieved as much as angry. But you, his thumb traced her cheekbone. You're real. What we have is real. And I'll fight my father every day for the rest of my life if that's what it takes to protect it. Valeri wanted to believe him, wanted to sink into his arms and trust that love was enough. But she'd read those investigation reports, seen how thoroughly Richard Ashford could dismantle a life when he chose to. What if fighting isn't enough? She whispered. What if he makes it impossible for me to work anywhere? What if staying with you costs me everything I've built? Then I'll walk away from the company, from all of it. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean it. Wendell's voice turned fierce. I spent 2 years engaged to someone I didn't love because it made business sense. I've sacrificed relationships, friendships, my relationship with my sister, all for a company I'm not even sure I want anymore. I'm not sacrificing you, Valeri. Not for my father, not for the board, not for the Ashford legacy. If it comes down to choosing between the company and you, I choose you. Tears burned her eyes. That's not fair. What's not fair? Making me the reason you give up everything you've worked for. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't be responsible for that. If you walk away from Delacroix and regret it, if you end up resenting me for what you lost, that won't happen. You can't know that. I know I've spent 15 years building a company I'm not sure I even believe in anymore. I know I lie awake at night wondering if this is all there is. Board meetings and merger deals and strategic partnerships that mean everything and nothing. I know that before you, I couldn't remember the last time I felt genuine happiness instead of just accomplished satisfaction. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. And I know that if I lose you to protect a company that's already cost me most of what matters, I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. Valeri closed her eyes, breathing him in. This was impossible. They were impossible. The investigation reports and contracts and Richard Ashford's looming presence made that clear. But standing here, held in Wendell's arms, feeling the solid reality of him against her, she couldn't make herself walk away. What do we do? She asked. We finish the Fontaine merger. We prove to everyone that you earned your position through talent, not favoritism. And then... He pulled back to look at her. Then I'm going to tell my father exactly where he can put his investigations and his contracts and his vision for my life. I'm going to choose you, publicly, permanently, and let the consequences come. He'll remove you from the CEO position. Let him try. I own 49% of the company. I have allies on the board. It won't be easy, but I can fight him. His hands framed her face. The question is, are you willing to fight with me? Because I won't lie to you, Valeri. It's going to get ugly. My father doesn't lose gracefully. He'll come after you in ways you can't imagine. He'll make staying with me the hardest thing you've ever done. She thought about her mother, who'd cleaned houses for 40 years and never complained. Her father, who'd driven a taxi 80 hours a week so she could have opportunities he'd never had. They taught her that nothing worth having came easy, that the best things in life required fighting for. "I'm willing to fight," she said, "but I need you to promise me something, anything. If it becomes too much, if fighting your father costs you the company and you start to resent me for it, you have to tell me. You have to be honest. Because I'd rather lose you to honesty than watch you slowly grow to hate me for what I cost you. That will never happen. Promise me anyway." "I promise." He kissed her then, soft and reverent. "I promise I'll always tell you the truth, even when it's hard, even when I'm scared. No more secrets." "No more secrets," she echoed. They stood there, wrapped in each other, while Paris glittered outside the windows. Valérie knew the battle was just beginning, that Richard Ashford would escalate when he learned Wendell wasn't backing down, that Charlotte's warning was only the first of many obstacles they'd face. But for now, this was enough. This moment, this choice, this man who'd promised to fight for her even when it cost him everything. "The vegetables are going to go bad if we don't cook them soon," Wendell said against her hair. Valérie laughed through her tears. "Then I guess we should cook." And they moved to the kitchen together, and Wendell taught her his mother's recipe for coq au vin, another Sunday tradition, he explained, from before his father's company consumed every moment of their lives. Valérie chopped vegetables while he braised chicken, and they worked in comfortable silence, punctuated by stolen kisses and hands that found each other without thinking. It felt like building something, not just dinner, but a life. A partnership. A future that had nothing to do with contracts or investigations or family legacies, and everything to do with this. Two people choosing each other despite impossible odds. They ate on the terrace, wrapped in blankets against the November cold, the Eiffel Tower sparkling on the hour like clockwork. Wendell told her stories about his mother, about Sunday dinners and her laugh, and the way she'd made their small Manchester flat feel like a palace through sheer force of love. Valérie told him about her parents' sacrifices, about growing up knowing every opportunity came at a cost someone else had paid, about the weight of carrying their dreams on her shoulders. "They sound remarkable," Wendell said. "Your parents?" "They are. They'd like you, I think, once they got past the terror of me dating my CEO. When can I meet them?" The question caught her off guard. "You want to meet my parents?" "Of course I do. You're important to me. They're important to you. Therefore they're important to me. That's how this works, isn't it?" Valérie's eyes burned again. Charlotte had been right about one thing. The way Wendell looked at her was different. Real. Like she mattered not because of what she could do for the company or how she fit into some predetermined role, but simply because she was herself. "Christmas," she heard herself say. "They're flying here for Christmas. You could meet them then." "I'd like that." He raised his wine glass. "To Christmas. To your parents, to fighting impossible battles together." She clinked her glass against his. "To us, against the world if necessary." They finished dinner and retreated inside, intending to work on merger documents. But Valérie's phone rang before they'd even opened their laptops. Margot's name flashed on the screen. "Answer it," Wendell said. She wouldn't call this late unless it was important. Valérie picked up. "Margot, what's wrong? Where are you right now? Are you with Wendell?" "Yes, we're at his..." "Why?" "Don't react. Don't let him see your face. But you need to know. Someone leaked to Le Monde. There's going to be a story tomorrow morning about the CEO of Delacroix and Associés conducting an inappropriate relationship with a junior employee. They have photos, dates, meetings, everything." The floor dropped out from under Valérie's world. "How? I don't know. But it gets worse. The article claims you've been receiving preferential treatment, that your assignment to the Fontaine merger was nepotism. That every success you've had since joining the company has been because you're sleeping with Wendell. That's not true. I know it's not true. Anyone who's worked with you knows it's not true. But Le Monde has a source, someone inside the company feeding them information, someone who wants to destroy both of you. Valérie looked at Wendell, who was watching her with growing concern. She thought about Richard Ashford, about investigations and contracts and the machine designed to grind down anyone who threatened the family legacy. The battle Charlotte had warned about wasn't coming. It was already here. "When does the story publish?" Valérie asked, her voice hollow. 6 in the morning, which means you have... Margot checked her watch. 9 hours to figure out how to respond. "I'm sorry, Valérie." "I'm so sorry." The line went dead. Wendell was already on his feet. "What happened?" Valérie told him. Watched his expression shift from concern to fury to something that looked like grim resignation. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Father, it's Wendell. I know what you did, and I know what you're planning. So let me be absolutely clear. If that story runs tomorrow, I'm calling a press conference. I'm going to tell the entire world exactly what kind of man you are. Every contract you've forced on women I've dated, every investigation, every manipulation, I'll burn the Ashford reputation to the ground if that's what it takes to protect Valérie. Try me." He ended the call without waiting for a response. Valérie stared at him. "You just threatened your father." "I just drew a line in the sand." Wendell's grey eyes were steel. "He can cross it if he wants. But he needs to understand that I'm done playing by his rules, done sacrificing my life for his legacy, done choosing the company over the people I love." The word hung in the air between them. Love. He hadn't said it before, hadn't named what this was growing between them. "Wendell, I love you." He said it simply, clearly, like it was the easiest truth he'd ever spoken. "I love you, Valérie Baptiste. And I'm not losing you. Not to my father, not to Le Monde, not to anyone. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. Agreed." She should be terrified, should be preparing for her career to implode, for her reputation to be shredded across French media, for everything she'd worked for to disappear in a single morning. Instead, all she felt was certainty. "I love you too," she whispered, "and yes, together." They spent the night preparing, drafting statements, gathering evidence of Valérie's qualifications, building a defense against accusations they both knew were coming. But as dawn broke over Paris, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Valérie's phone stayed silent. No notifications, no alerts, no catastrophic Le Monde exposé destroying their lives. At 6:15, Wendell's phone rang. He answered, listened, then slowly smiled. "Understood. Thank you for letting me know." He ended the call and turned to Valérie. "That was my father's attorney. The Le Monde story has been killed. Permanently." "How?" "My father pulled it. Apparently my threat last night made him reconsider his strategy. The attorney says he wants to meet, to discuss terms." "Terms for what?" "For allowing us to continue our relationship, without interference, without investigations." Wendell's expression turned cautious. "He's offering a truce. The question is, do we trust it?" Valérie thought about Charlotte's warning, about contracts and expectations and the price of being an Ashford, about Richard Ashford's history of crushing anyone who didn't fall in line. "No," she said finally, "we don't trust it, but we hear what he has to say, and then we decide together how to respond." "Together," Wendell echoed, pulling her close. "Always together." Outside the windows, Paris awakened to a new day. Somewhere in the city, Richard Ashford was planning his next move. The Fontaine merger still hung in the balance. The board still watched. The company still demanded everything. But for the first time since that night at the chateau, Valerie felt ready, not because the obstacles had disappeared, but because she wasn't facing them alone. Whatever came next, they'd handle it. Together. Even if together meant standing against the entire Ashford empire. Even if together meant risking everything for love. The meeting with Richard Ashford was scheduled for 3 o'clock on a grey November afternoon. Valerie arrived at the Delacroix and Associés headquarters an hour early, her portfolio filled with documents she'd spent the past 2 days preparing. Not for Richard, but for herself. She'd made a decision. One that would shock Wendell, probably terrify him, and definitely change everything between them. But it was the right decision. The only decision that would let her look at herself in the mirror and know she'd stayed true to who she was. Margot found her at her desk, staring at the Paris skyline without really seeing it. "You look like you're preparing for war," Margot said, setting down a coffee. "Extra strong. You'll need it." "Have you ever made a choice that you knew would blow up your entire life, but felt absolutely certain it was right anyway?" Valerie asked. "Once. I quit a job I loved because my boss was brilliant, but also gradually destroying my confidence. Everyone thought I was insane. It was a prestigious position, great salary, amazing opportunities, but I was dying inside." Margot sat on the edge of Valerie's desk. 2 years later, I was running the M&A division here. Best decision I ever made, even though it terrified me at the time. "Were you scared?" "Absolutely, but I was more scared of becoming someone I didn't recognize." Margot studied her carefully. "What are you planning, Valerie? Something either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I'm not sure which yet." "Those are usually the same thing." Margot squeezed her shoulder. "Whatever it is, I'm in your corner. You've earned that." At 2:45, Valerie took the elevator to the 68th floor, the executive boardroom level, 1 floor above even Wendell's office. This was Richard Ashford's domain, the place where empires were built and careers were destroyed. Wendell waited outside the boardroom doors, his expression tight with tension. "You don't have to do this. I can meet with him alone. We're partners, remember?" "Valerie," he lowered his voice, "my father is not a kind man. He's going to say things designed to make you doubt yourself, doubt us. He's going to offer you money to leave. He's going to threaten your career. He's going to—" "I know." She straightened her shoulders. "But I'm not Charlotte. I'm not going to be intimidated into disappearing, so let's go hear what he has to say." The boardroom was exactly as intimidating as she'd expected. Mahogany table that could seat 30 people, windows overlooking all of Paris, portraits of past Delacroix leaders lining the walls, their painted eyes seeming to judge anyone who entered. Richard Ashford sat at the head of the table, a man in his late 60s with silver hair, sharp features, and eyes that were a colder version of Wendell's grey. He wore a 3-piece suit that probably cost €10,000 and an expression that suggested he'd never lost a negotiation in his life. "Wendell, Miss Baptiste, please sit." His voice was cultured, precise, each word carefully chosen. "I appreciate you both coming. I know tensions have been elevated in recent weeks." Valerie sat across from him, spine straight, meeting his gaze without flinching. She'd faced down poverty, scholarship committees, and 3 years of Columbia Business School. She could face down one controlling father. "Let me be direct," Richard continued. "I had the Le Mans story killed because my son made certain threats that, while dramatic, contained enough truth to be problematic. However, I want to be clear about my position. This relationship," he gestured between Valerie and Wendell, "is inappropriate, potentially damaging to the company, and needs to end." "No." The word came from Valerie's mouth before Wendell could respond. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm sorry?" I said no. "You don't get to dictate the terms of our personal lives." Valerie opened her portfolio and pulled out a document, sliding it across the polished table. "That's my completed analysis of the Fontaine merger, 372 pages. Every financial projection, every risk assessment, every legal contingency. I've identified 47 areas where Fontaine's financial reporting doesn't match their operational reality. I've restructured the acquisition to save Delacroix €215 million. And I've negotiated directly with Fontaine's CFO to resolve the labor disputes that were threatening to derail the entire deal." Richard picked up the document, his expression unreadable. "The board meeting to approve the Fontaine merger is tomorrow at 10 o'clock, Valerie continued. "I'm presenting the final terms, not as Wendell's girlfriend, not as some junior analyst who slept her way onto the deal team, but as the person who saved this acquisition when it was falling apart. And after the board approves the merger based solely on the quality of my work, I'm going to do something that will make all your investigations and threats and manipulations completely irrelevant." "And what's that?" Richard's voice was ice. "I'm resigning from Delacroix and Associés, effective 30 days after the merger closes." The silence in the boardroom was absolute. Valerie could feel Wendell's shock radiating from beside her, but she didn't look at him. Couldn't. If she saw his face, saw the hurt or confusion or betrayal there, she might lose her nerve. "I'm resigning," she repeated, her voice steady, "because I won't work for a company where my relationship with the CEO will forever overshadow my achievements. Because I won't give you ammunition to use against Wendell or leverage to control our personal lives, and because I'm good enough to work anywhere I want. Your son didn't make me successful, Mr. Ashford. My work made me successful, and I'll prove that by building a career somewhere that judges me solely on merit." Richard leaned back in his chair, studying her with new interest. "You're quite something, Miss Baptiste. I'm someone who refuses to be a pawn in your family's power struggle. You wanted me gone. Fine, I'm leaving, but on my terms, after I've proven exactly why Wendell hired me in the first place, after everyone in this company knows that I earned my position." "Valerie," Wendell's voice was raw, "you can't. I can, and I am." She finally looked at him, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke her. "I love you. More than I thought possible to love someone I've known for such a short time, but I won't be the reason you lose everything. And I won't spend the rest of my career wondering if I succeeded because of my talent or because I'm dating the CEO. So I'm choosing a third option. I'm proving my worth, and then I'm leaving. And after I leave, if you still want me, if this is still real, then we'll build something together that has nothing to do with Delacroix or your father or anyone's expectations except our own." Wendell stared at her like she'd just set fire to the bridge between them. "You're asking me to let you walk away?" "I'm asking you to trust that walking away isn't the same as giving up. I'm not running, Wendell. I'm choosing. There's a difference." Richard Ashford's expression had shifted to something almost like approval. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Most people in your position would fight to stay. Demand recognition. Cling to the relationship regardless of consequences. But you're willing to sacrifice your position here to protect both your integrity and my son's career. That takes courage. I don't need your approval, Mr. Ashford. I just need you to understand that I am not your enemy. I never was. I love your son. I believe in his vision for this company, but I won't be the weapon you use against him, and I won't let my presence here diminish everything he's worked to achieve." She stood, gathering her portfolio. "Tomorrow morning I'll present the Fontaine merger to the board. It will be the best presentation they've ever seen. And then I'll submit my formal resignation. 30 days' notice. Time enough to transition my projects and train my replacement. Everything professional, everything clean. Valerie, wait. Wendell reached for her hand, but she stepped back. Tomorrow, she said softly, after the presentation. We'll talk then. But tonight, I need you to sit with this decision and understand why I'm making it. Not because I don't love you, but because I do. Because some things are worth more than a job, even a job I love. And my integrity, my certainty that I earned every success through my own work, is one of those things. She left the boardroom without looking back, made it to the elevator, made it to the ground floor, made it to the street outside before the tears came. She just walked away from the best job she'd ever had, the career she'd sacrificed everything to build, and the man she loved more than she'd known was possible. All to prove a point, all to maintain the one thing her parents had taught her mattered more than anything, her self-respect. It was either the bravest thing she'd ever done or the most foolish. Time would tell which. The board meeting started at exactly 10 o'clock. 23 board members, including Richard Ashford. Wendell sat at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral. He hadn't called her last night, hadn't texted, hadn't shown up at her apartment to argue or beg her to reconsider. His silence hurt more than she'd expected, but Valerie understood. She'd asked him to sit with her decision, to really think about what it meant. Apparently, he'd taken her seriously. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wendell began, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd commanded rooms like this for 15 years. "We're here to vote on the Fontaine acquisition, 3.7 billion euros, the largest merger in Delacroix history. The presentation will be delivered by Valérie Baptiste, junior analyst from our M&A division, who has served as lead researcher and negotiator on this deal." "Miss Baptiste?" Valerie stood, connected her laptop to the presentation screen and took a breath. Everything she'd worked for came down to the next 45 minutes. Every late night, every spreadsheet, every sacrifice her parents had made so she could stand in rooms like this. She was ready. The Fontaine acquisition represents a strategic opportunity to expand Delacroix's luxury goods portfolio while eliminating a key competitor, she began, her voice clear and confident. However, the initial terms negotiated would have resulted in substantial losses over the first 5 years due to operational inefficiencies, labor disputes, and accounting irregularities that weren't identified in preliminary due diligence. She walked them through her analysis, every number, every projection, every risk she'd identified and solution she'd engineered. She showed them how she'd saved 215 million euros by restructuring the payment terms. How she'd negotiated directly with Fontaine's labor unions to prevent strikes that would have cost both companies hundreds of millions. How she'd identified creative tax structures that would save an additional 83 million over 10 years. The board members asked questions. Hard questions, the kind designed to find weaknesses in her analysis or judgment. Valerie answered every single one without hesitation, her preparation and expertise evident in each response. 43 minutes into her presentation, she saw it happen. The shift. Board members who'd entered skeptical began nodding, taking notes, looking at each other with expressions that said they'd found someone exceptional, not because she was dating the CEO, but because she was brilliant at her job. Richard Ashford asked the final question. "Miss Baptiste, you've presented an impressive analysis. But I have to ask, given your personal relationship with my son, how can this board be certain your recommendations aren't influenced by factors beyond pure business judgment?" The room went silent. Every board member turned to look at her. This was the test, the real question underlying everything else. Valerie met Richard's gaze steadily. "You can be certain, Mr. Ashford, because in exactly 30 days I will no longer work for this company." My resignation letter is already drafted. This presentation is my final major project at Delacroix and Associés, which means I have absolutely no incentive to recommend anything except what's genuinely best for this company. My personal relationship with your son has no bearing on my professional analysis, and I'm willing to stake my reputation, the reputation I'll carry to my next position, on these recommendations. The board erupted in whispers. Richard's expression remained inscrutable, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been respect. "Any other questions?" Valérie asked. Silence. "Then I recommend the board vote to approve the Fontaine acquisition under the restructured terms I've presented. Thank you for your time." She disconnected her laptop and sat down, her heart pounding. Wendell called for the vote. 23 hands rose. Unanimous approval. The Fontaine merger was done. 3.7 billion euros, the largest deal in company history. And she'd just delivered it flawlessly before announcing her departure. As the board members filed out, several stopped to shake her hand, to tell her she'd done exceptional work, to ask where she was going next, whether she'd consider consulting opportunities, whether she'd be open to offers from their own companies. She fielded each inquiry professionally, aware that Richard Ashford stood near the door, watching. When the room finally emptied, except for the three of them, Valérie, Wendell, and Richard, the older man approached. "That was the best board presentation I've seen in 30 years, Richard said bluntly. "And I still think you're wrong to leave. Delacroix needs people like you." "Thank you. But I meant what I said. I won't build my career in the shadow of your son's position. Even if I promised complete independence, your own division to run, direct reporting to the board instead of Wendell." It was a generous offer, more generous than Valérie had expected. Even then, because everyone would still know, still wonder, still question whether I earned it. Richard studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're stronger than Charlotte. She wanted to belong to this world. You're willing to walk away from it to maintain your integrity. That's rare, valuable. Wasted, frankly, but admirable." He turned to Wendell. "You're right, about her, about this. I've been trying to control your life because I was terrified you'd make choices that would destroy what I built. But watching her present today, watching her command that room with nothing but competence and courage, I realize I've been asking the wrong questions." "What are the right questions?" Wendell asked quietly. "Not whether she fits into our world, but whether our world deserves someone like her." Richard picked up his briefcase. "I'm lifting all investigations, destroying all files, and I'm going to call an executive session of the board to propose something I should have proposed years ago." "What's that?" "Your promotion to executive chairman, full control of strategic direction. I'll remain on the board, but you'll have final authority over all major decisions, including hiring, including promotions, including who you choose to spend your life with." Richard's voice softened slightly. "I built this company for you, Wendell, for our family. But I forgot that family means more than just the business. Your mother would have reminded me of that if she were still here. Consider this my very late apology for forgetting." He left without waiting for a response, the boardroom door clicking shut behind him with quiet finality. Wendell and Valérie sat in silence for a long moment. "You're still planning to leave," he said finally. "Yes. Even though my father just essentially gave me complete control of the company. Even though you could stay now without anyone questioning your motives. Even though." Valérie turned to face him fully. "Because this isn't about your father anymore, Wendell. It's about me. About knowing that I can succeed on my own merit in a place where our relationship isn't a factor. I need that. Not because I don't trust you, but because I need to trust myself." "How long?" "How long what? How long until you know? Until you've proven whatever you need to prove to yourself?" His voice was rough with emotion. "Because I'll wait, Valérie. A month, 6 months, a year, however long it takes for you to be certain of your own worth. And then, if you'll have me, I want to build a life with you. Not CEO and analyst, not boss and employee, just us. Tears slipped down Valerie's cheeks. You'd really wait? I've spent 38 years building a company. I can spend however long it takes building a life with you. He reached across the table, took her hand. I love you. That doesn't have an expiration date. That doesn't depend on you working here or not working here. It just is. I love you too. So much it scares me. Good. I'd be worried if you weren't scared. Everything worth having is terrifying. He stood, pulled her up with him, held her close. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to finish your 30 days here, train your replacement, do everything with the professionalism and competence that just made the board vote unanimously for a €3.7 billion acquisition. And then you're going to take whatever job offer you want, and I guarantee you'll have multiple offers after today's presentation, and you're going to be brilliant there too. And us? We keep dating. Like normal people, dinner, museums, walks along the Seine, weekend trips to places neither of us have been. We build a relationship that has nothing to do with Delacroix and everything to do with who we are when the business suits come off. He kissed her forehead. And maybe, eventually, if we're lucky and brave and willing to keep choosing each other, even when it's complicated, we build something permanent, something real, something that started at a chateau Gala but became so much more. Now Valerie pulled back just enough to look at him. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. I'm learning. You're a good teacher. She laughed, and it felt like releasing 3 weeks of tension. I'm terrified this won't work. That walking away from Delacroix will somehow break us. Then we'll be terrified together. But Valerie, I don't think anything can break us. Not my father, not corporate politics, not even your stubborn need to prove yourself. Because what we have, it's strong enough to survive you leaving. It's strong enough to survive whatever comes next. I believe that. I want to believe it too. Then let's find out. Together. She kissed him then, there in the empty boardroom where she'd just delivered the presentation of her career and announced her resignation in the same breath. It felt like an ending and a beginning, like closing one chapter and opening another. Terrifying, exhilarating, absolutely right. 6 months later, the apartment in the Marais was smaller than Wendell's penthouse. No Eiffel Tower views, no floating glass staircase, no art worth millions. But it had floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a kitchen table scarred from years of use, and morning light that poured through the windows like liquid gold. Valerie loved it. Coffee's ready, Wendell called from the kitchen, exactly as he had every Saturday morning for the past 4 months, ever since she'd moved in, after 3 months of dating while living separately, of proving to both of them that their relationship existed entirely independent of Delacroix and Associés. She found him at the stove, making his mother's recipe for Sunday breakfast, even though it was Saturday. He did that now, bent the rules, relaxed the rigid schedules, allowed himself to want things just because he wanted them. Richard had been true to his word. Wendell was now executive chairman with full strategic control. He'd restructured the company, promoted from within, and created a culture that valued talent over pedigree. Delacroix was thriving, and so was Valerie. She'd taken a position at a venture capital firm specializing in women-owned businesses. Smaller company, less prestige. But she was building something meaningful, helping women entrepreneurs access capital that traditional finance denied them. Her first successful exit had been worth €92 million. Her mother had cried when Valerie called to tell her. I have something for you, Wendell said, sliding an envelope across the table. If this is another job offer trying to steal me from Verde Capital, I'm going to be annoyed. I've had 6 this month alone. Not a job offer. Open it. Inside was a property listing, a small building in the 6th arrondissement, ground floor commercial space, 2 floors of apartments above. I don't understand, Valérie said. The ground floor could be Verde Capital's new offices. You've outgrown your current space. The 2nd floor could be home office space for both of us, and the 3rd floor, his voice softened, could be our home, if you wanted, if you're ready for that. Valérie looked at the listing, then at him. You bought a building. I made an offer contingent on your approval, very different. Wendell, I know it's fast. I know we said we'd take things slowly, but Valérie, I wake up in this apartment every morning and feel more at home than I ever did in that penthouse. I spend more time at Verde's offices visiting you than I do in my own. I've had dinner with your parents 3 times, and your father taught me how to change a tire last month because he said no son-in-law of his was going to be helpless with basic car maintenance. He called you his son-in-law? Prematurely, apparently, since I haven't actually asked the question yet. Wendell got down on one knee, right there in their kitchen, and pulled a small box from his pocket. Valérie Baptiste, you walked into my life at a gala I didn't want to attend. You challenged every assumption I had about who I was supposed to be and what my life was supposed to look like. You had the courage to walk away from everything to maintain your integrity. And then you had even more courage to come back and build something real with me. You make me better, braver, more myself, and I would be honored, so deeply honored, if you'd agree to marry me. Not CEO to analyst, not boss to employee. Just 2 people who found each other in the middle of complicated lives and decided they were worth fighting for. The ring was simple, beautiful. A single diamond that caught the morning light and scattered it across the kitchen walls. Yes, Valérie whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger, stood, kissed her with all the emotion of 6 months of choosing each other despite impossible odds. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. My mother is going to lose her mind, Valérie said, laughing through tears. She's been asking when you were going to propose since Christmas. Your father knew. I asked his permission last month, very traditional. He cried, which made me cry, which was mortifying but also kind of perfect. You asked my father's permission. Of course I did. He raised the woman I love. I wasn't going to disrespect that by not including him. Wendell pulled her close. Although he did threaten to kill me if I ever hurt you, very specifically, with details about tire irons and the Seine. Your father is surprisingly creative with threats. Valérie laughed, the sound full of joy and relief, and the particular happiness that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. So, Wendell asked, the building? Should I finalize the purchase? She looked around their kitchen. Thought about Verde Capital growing, about needing space, about building a life that was theirs together, about the journey from that first night at the chateau to this moment in morning sunlight. Yes, buy the building. Let's build something. Together. Always together. Outside the window, Paris hummed with life. The city of light and shadows, romance and revolution, impossible love stories that somehow found a way. Theirs was just one more, but it was theirs. Built on honesty and courage and the absolute certainty that some connections are worth fighting for, even when the fight costs everything, especially then.